folks, I'm glad you're all here. Thank you very much for joining me. People need to be prepared for what's probably going to be coming. After the U.S., because of the invasion of Ukraine, confiscated over $300 billion of Russian money, other smaller countries are now worried that the same thing could happen to them. And now they're looking to either join BRICS or some other form of monetary form and going to be dumping the dollar. They wonder who in the world is actually in charge of our government. Corruption in judges has recently come out. We've known there's been corruption in the government for a long time. Rigged elections. Yeah, we're getting to be looking much like a banana republic. Never in the history of our government has a former president ever been charged with a crime. Gold prices closed on the 6th, Wednesday, at $2,010 a troy ounce. That evidently was worse than expected, and the U.S. labor market data accumulated during the week triggered investors' worry about a recession. I don't think we're going into a recession. We're going to be going into hyperinflation soon, and that could happen within a week with no notice at all, or another Great Depression. Initial jobless claims for the week ending on April 1st increased by 228,000 above the forecast of 200,000. People may still be working, but they've had their hours cut. Walmart recently cut hours. Amazon is laying off people. You name it. Yeah, people are getting laid off. Silicon Valley this last week laid off, I believe, over 100 people. Not only has governments, countries around the world lost confidence in the United States, but they've lost confidence in our dollar and are dumping it. China and Brazil recently finalized a trade deal in their own currency, completing the bypass of the U.S. dollar. Brazil ranks as the largest Latin American economy, and China is its biggest trade partner. Trade between China and Brazil amounts to some $150 billion per year. China overtook the U.S. as Brazil's #1 trading partner in 2009. China also has dollarless trade agreement with Russia, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia. Last week, a Russian official announced that the BRICS nation, BRICS, are working to develop a new currency, yet another sign the dollar dominance is waning. Other countries now talking about joining the BRICS nation is Algeria, Argentina, Bahrain, Bangladesh, Belarus, Egypt, Indonesia, Iran, Mexico, Nigeria, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, Syria, and Turkey, Venezuela, and Zimbabwe. The latest blow to the dollar hegemony. Earlier this year, Saudi Arabia financial minister said the country was open to discussing trade in currency other than the U.S. dollar. Here we have an image of OPEC nations. This could mark the beginning of the end of the petrodollar exclusively. And in March, Reuters reported that recent oil deals between India and Russia have been settled in currency other than dollars. Over the last several years, many countries have made a concrete effort to limit dependence on the U.S. dollar. Confidence in the greenback continues to erode thanks to the proliferate borrowing and spending and money creation by the U.S. government. America's use of the dollar as a foreign policy weapon also makes countries wary of relying solely on the dollar. More so since the U.S. took over 700 billion Russian dollars, along with all the sanctions that we put on Russia. That backfired and made things more expensive there in Europe. All these countries figure one way to keep the U.S. from bullying other countries about foreign policy is to minimize dependence on the dollar. The only reason the U.S. can get away with a massive budget deficit and an ever-growing national debt to the extent that it does is that the dollar's role on the world reserve currency. It has created a built-in global demand for dollars and the U.S. Treasury that absorbs the money creation and maintain the dollar strength. But what happens if that demand drops? What happens if China and the other countries decide they don't want to hold a currency that is losing value every day? If the demand for the dollar tanks, the greenback's value will quickly erode away. That means even worse price inflation for Americans. And in the worst case scenario, it could collapse the dollar completely. As relations between Russia and the U.S. deteriorated prior to the Ukraine invasion, the Russian central bank aggressively divested itself of U.S. Treasury, selling off nearly half of its U.S. debt in April of 2018 alone. In June 2021, Russia announced plans to completely eliminate dollars and dollar-denominated assets from its sovereign wealth funds. The Russians didn't hold a lot of treasuries, but imagine if China started dumping the greenback. This trade deal with Brazil and now all these other countries shows that the dollar is losing its power. Credibility and its status as the reserve currency is the only thing the U.S. dollar is going to hang on to. Take that away and the U.S. dollar isn't a whole lot better than the Zimbabwe dollar. Gonna be pretty well worthless. Remember when Obama went to Saudi Arabia with his hat in his hand, begging OPEC, Saudi Arabia, to increase oil production? Well, Saudi Arabia and other OPEC oil producers last Sunday on the 2nd announced further oil output cuts of around 1.16 billion barrels per day. Supposedly they were caught off guard by this, and they're saying that it's going to cause gas prices here in the U.S. to rise. Pledges by the other OPEC countries is going to actually decrease the amount of oil by 3.66 million barrels per day. According to Reuters, the daily demand is 3.7%. A top OPEC producer in Saudi Arabia said it would cut output by 500,000 barrels per day. They say they are taking precautions to support the stability of the oil market because of what's going on with the banking system around the world. Just in case there's a possibility of a reduction in demand. Well, that means less people working, less people traveling. Yeah, what do they know that we haven't been told? Here in the U.S., Biden's been draining our emergency oil reserve, trying to keep prices down. And that's supposed to be kept for emergencies. That's why it's called an emergency oil reserve, in case of war or something else. Do any of you know exactly how much is left in our emergency oil reserve? Please put that down below. The United Arab Emirates said that they would cut production by 144,000 barrels per day. Kuwait announced it would cut 128,000 barrels per day. And Oman announced it's cutting 40,000 barrels per day. Algeria is cutting output by 48,000 barrels per day. And Kazakhstan is going to cut output by 78,000 barrels per day. Russia said that they were going to voluntarily cut 500,000 barrels per day by the end of 2023. All these cuts is showing that the cooperation amongst the countries of OPEC is very strong. People need to be prepared. Start preparing if you're not prepared for what's coming. Hyperinflation. What's hyperinflation? It starts when a country's government begins printing money to pay for its spending instead of tightening the money supply to stop inflation. Hyperinflation is when the prices of goods and services rise more than 50% a month. As the government increases the money supply, prices rise in regular inflation. So what does the government do? They just keep printing and printing more money, and that's what they're doing right now. With too much currency sloshing around, prices skyrocket. Effects of hyperinflation. When hyperinflation is in effect, consumers' behavior adjusts. To keep from paying more for goods tomorrow, people begin to hoard today. I don't call it hoarding, I call it prepping. That stockpiling creates shortages. Prepping, what they call hoarding, can start with durable goods such as automobiles and washing machines, electronics. As hyperinflation continues, people stock up on perishable goods like bread, milk, flour, wheat, sugar, canned goods, coffee. These daily supplies will become scarce and more expensive, and the economy falls apart. People lose their savings as cash loses its value. For that reason, the elderly are most often most vulnerable to hyperinflation. Soon banks and lenders go bankrupt because their loans lose value. They run out of cash, and people stop making deposits. I believe last week, I think it was, the U.S. banks had over $1 trillion withdrawn from their banks. The most recent example of hyperinflation is in Venezuela. Prices rose 41% in 2013, and by 2018, inflation was at 65%. Unemployment rose to over 20%, similar to the U.S. rate during the Great Depression. So to try and fight inflation, what they did was put in price controls. And those price controls ended up putting many businesses out of business because they had to pay the higher prices for the goods to make products or to sell. What you need to do is stock up on things that can make your other foods stretch. Have a supply of rice, dried beans, potatoes, and flour on hand means that you can readily add these items as sides and fillers to any meal, saving both time and money. Homemade biscuits can only take about 20 minutes to make from scratch. Learn how to cook from scratch. It's surprising how many of these younger kids, in their early 20s, don't even know how to cook from scratch. A quick meal for them is a TV dinner, a frozen pizza, takeout, McDonald's. All things that do not have a very good nutritional value. Look at what they did during the Great Depression. Fresh fruits and vegetables were not in ample supply in grocery stores back then. People knew and learned how to plant their own gardens. They learned about canning and preserving and harvesting and how to store things for the rest of the year. If you buy in bulk, that will save you money even today. We know for a fact that they're going to come out with the central bank digital currency. With this digital currency, they're going to be able to tell you how much each person or each family is going to be able to buy. One of the things that was in real short supply was meat. During World War II, they had stamp books that you use to purchase your items. It's amazing what was rationed back then, even gasoline. Another reason why you need to learn how to grow fresh fruits and vegetables at home. The ration books were used to keep inflation down. That was their excuse. During World War II, many people were working long hours, and they said they didn't have much time for shopping. So if they went to the store to get coffee, there wouldn't be any because it was already all bought up. People that weren't working would have plenty of time to stand in the long lines to buy the food. The Defense Council said that rationing was a way to protect the little man who was unable to pay the high prices for articles which was limited in quantity. The number one items that became in short supply during the war was sugar, tires, gasoline, meat, coffee, butter, canned goods, and shoes. Those all came under the rationing regulations. Alcohol and cigarettes, Yeah, they weren't regulated. Sugar was the first item rationed nationwide, followed by coffee. Soon other items were rationed, including processed foods, such as canned, jarred, dried, frozen, and bottled products, followed by meat, fish, and dairy items. Even bubble gum was rationed, cocoa, chocolate. For stores to replenish their shelves, they had to turn in the stamps. Otherwise, they had to get goods what they called from the black market. One study showed that about 20% of American businesses were involved in the black market, while nearly 7% were caught doing the illegal activity. Few were prosecuted. Hoarding became the mainstay of the black market. Many tried to beat the game by hoarding goods about to be rationed, while others used the iconic justification of, I'm just stocking up before the hoarders get there. Yeah, I would be one of those hoarders. It's like, snooze, you lose. The central bank digital currency would prevent counterfeiting like they did with these cards back then. Fake coupon cards were estimated to be about 5% of the gasoline that was sold. Yeah, counterfeit cards. So things you buy today, yeah, you can use it for bartering later. Rice, beans, bullets. I'm going to get reusable canning lids in my next purchase that I make when I get paid. And some more ball canning lids. The reason for ball is because, they're more dependable. Less of a chance of a false seal on, when you can them. For meats and low acid foods, you need a pressure cooker, and it's really easy to use. This is the one I have, which is the Presto canner. And I can fit, I believe it's 7 quarts in there. I don't have a rack for it. I probably should get another rack, and then they got different prices and stuff. But, those of you that have followed me for a while remember when I first started pressure canning. And then there's also the hot water bath that a lot of foods can be stored. To do a hot water bath, all it needs is to have the water so many inches over the jar. And there's things you can do in the hot water bath and things that you can't, that needs to be pressure. This is the one I have, which is only about $60, but I probably paid less for it because I got it a while ago. That is also really easy. Putting up food, either hot water bath or pressure canning, is a great way for long-term storage of food. I'm hoping to talk my daughter into putting up a chicken coop this year. I'm living in an apartment, so there's no way I could raise chickens here. But she has a house with a yard. And yeah, we've had chickens before when she was little. They're so easy to take care of. When she was little, we raised pigs. We named the pigs Butcher 1 and Butcher 2. And that was the best meat that I had ever tasted after it was butchered. But surprisingly, when we got the meat back from the butcher, they only had 3 legs each. And only one pig had one side of ribs. So that was the only time we took our meat to that butcher, but live and learn. She had a pretty good experience growing up. Like I said, we had chickens, we had pigs, we had sheep, we had rabbits, all kinds of critters. But that was in Oregon, and we didn't have any restrictions on what we could raise. And now I'm in South Dakota. We can have chickens here, no roosters, I believe. And I've talked about, and I showed on Twitter, my little baby tomato plants that I'm sprouting. Those will be grown in pots indoors. Thing I'm going to be getting is more grow lights. These are real nice. I like them better than the other ones. It actually shines like a white light, but it's, let's see, indoor, 200 watt spectrum. It says for hydroponics, but yeah, I got it for my little tomato plants. Yeah. So I'm going to be getting more of those. Yeah, they're full spectrum lights. I really like this one. I'm not affiliated. I don't get any money or anything like that by recommending different products. But this one, I got it wet by accident when I was watering the plants, the backside of it. And the water ran off, and it still worked. Yeah, it didn't short out. It sealed really good. So I really like that. Yeah, normally it probably would have shorted out, and yeah, would have had a big problem. Right now, my little baby tomato plants are about this size right here, where it shows just the one leaf. It's just now starting to get their second pair of leaves. What they got here showing is peppers. And I'm going to try and start those soon. I saved seeds from some peppers that I got at a yard sale last year that came from a farm. I don't know if they'll sprout or not, but that's what I'm hoping to do. And the reason I'm going to grow them indoors is because in years past, I've had problems with people, helping themselves to my small garden that I got underneath my front window. Yeah. So if we do have shortages of food coming up because of what's going on with the dollar, yeah, I'm not going to take any chances. Desperate people will do desperate things, right? Yeah, they will. So I hope you're preparing for what's coming. There's all kinds of channels out there that tells you how to grow things, how to put up food, how to store food, and they've warned you about what's coming. You know, things you buy now is a darn good investment for what it will cost you a year from now. So what are your thoughts? Put your comments down below. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. As always, be prepared, and you're prepared, and you'll be safe. And I'll talk to you later. God bless you. Bye.